friends, like if someone talks
And that.
I don't care. So these questions I was like, definitely not true.
Okay, another minute or so?
Maybe.
Eternal.
I definitely know that.
If you scroll down, everything has an animal. I feel like if we should be looking teddy bear.
What are the animals?
That's right.
I don't know the other two. I'm assuming competing would be a what?
A shark.
A shark.
That would be
appropriate.
Okay, so hopefully you have an idea of what your managing style is. It's a good place to start. So in times like this, it's good to know what your style is, and some of you may not be aware of it. But it is a good way to start so that you have some direction of where to go if you run into someone with the same style or with a different style. So creating a win-win. Again, the scenarios. Scenario 1 is a situation where you're kind of like an innocent bystander potentially, and you've been accused of helping somebody cheat. So again, if in the perspective as a student and as the instructor, the type of conflict you think that would arise, how would you manage that particular situation? Scenario 2, again, you're a supervisor, 2 people called in sick, and there's a big assignment due for the students the next day. How do you get them to respect your decision? In scenario 3, how do you tell the supervisor what you think without stepping on their toes, without challenging their authority? In the last scenario, you approach a coach, you're going to have to give them some bad news, you know they're going to yell at you. How do you handle that situation? How do you prepare for that? There's something called the mindful approach. Reframing, recognizing, knowing conflict styles, knowing your style, but also knowing the style of the person in front of you. Without having them do the questionnaire, how can you find out what their style is, or at least get hints of what their style is? What was the first part of this talk today? Body language. Okay, that might give you some clues, the tone of their voice, their body language. Trust, getting to know your coaches, as well will give you an idea of what type of management style or conflict style they have. And then responding, and those are some of the tools we'll talk about on how to resolve some of the conflict. Reframing. First thing you need to do is try to change your perspective. Conflict, again, it's normal, it's inevitable, it's good. Don't treat it as something bad. Think of it as a learning experience for both you and the person you're having conflict with. A lot of times it's just people not knowing. Try to change their perspective. Try to have them see it from your side as a healthcare professional. Try to have them see the big picture, because a lot of times they don't see the big picture, right? Behave and communicate in a productive manner. Again, we talk about verbal and nonverbal communication. How you present yourself on day 1 plays a huge role. How you present yourself during practice, during games, outside of practice, in the hallways, on the bus, during road trips. Those will all affect how you're portrayed in the eyes of your athletes and your coaches. Okay, so it's very important to be aware of that. If you're not aware, videotape yourself. You don't have to tell anyone, you don't have to show anybody, but videotape yourself. That's why I'm doing it, because I don't really know. I never knew. Okay, so that's one of the things I'm doing this year, is to learn more about how I do things. Recognize that people are different. There's going to be personal differences, attitudes, values, behaviors. Your roles as a therapist, as a coach, they're all going to be different as well, and obviously your perspective will be different. Contextual differences. Sometimes the goals may be incompatible. In that situation, you might have to compete because it is a policy, it is a law, it is a rule that must be followed. And then last but not least, relationship issues. This sometimes may not be your fault. The student last year might have set up a bad situation for you. Okay, but then how do you fix that? Okay, how do you collaborate to fix that? Fixing that could lead to better understanding and trust. Conflict styles we talked about already. So you should have an idea of what your conflict style is. Again, try to pick up on verbal communication, nonverbal communication, to determine what the conflict style is of the person you're in conflict with. So to respond, here are some pointers that hopefully will help you at your site and or with the scenarios you've been given. So first thing, focus on principles, policies, laws, your scope of practice, and the relationship between you and the person you're having the conflict with. Some things you can't change. Okay? This you could potentially influence. Okay? But know what your role is and what the other person's role is. And then take a look and see what the ultimate goal is between you and the person and the situation. Visualize parties and possible scenarios. Anticipate problems and possible responses. And you can do that by reversing roles. Okay, so like I had you guys read that scenario at the beginning. Play it through your head and think about what direction the conversation would go in. And then be prepared for it. And last but not least, be aware of how you communicate. Now again, for that scenario where you're in the office with the coach, you're sitting behind the desk. You know, if your hands are in front, elbows on the table, you're like this or you're like this. It does say something. A lot of times the person you're communicating with might assume the same postures as you. So if you sit like this and they do it too, more likely than not, there's not going to be any progress because you're both closed off. Okay, but you need to be aware of that. How to respond? Show empathy. What does empathy mean? What does empathy mean? Versus apathy.
Empathy does not mean like being sympathetic, like being understandable, like not criticizing them.
Yeah, so showing emotion. Apathy means showing no emotion. Okay, so show that you're concerned about the situation. Show you're concerned about the big picture. Sincerity. Timing is important. I remember talking to someone about a potential situation. A situation on the sideline where people were yelling at them, and would it be an appropriate time to discuss that particular situation while the coach is yelling at you? It's probably not appropriate at that time. Okay, what is your main role and responsibility at that moment? Do the best you can. But if somebody is yelling at you, their judgment is way too clouded for them to have a reasonable conversation with you to find progress. So timing is important. You might have to wait a while. Have a cooling off period. Avoid first before you collaborate. What does brevity mean? Brevity. You need to do this when you write papers. Can I do what brevity means? Short and concise, to the point. Don't beat around the bush. Especially if it's a really complex situation. Otherwise, people get drowned in your words and they don't pay attention. Okay, so be short and to the point. If you can refer back to policies, rules, your scope of practice, then refer to that. Observe and listen. Again, we talked about recognizing body language, listening, being an active listener, not only listening to what they're saying, but how they're saying it. Use words such as and we versus but and I. Okay, this is more of a team approach. And again, time out. That goes with timing. Okay. Sometimes for you, in reflecting back on the situation, it does help to take a step back and look at the big picture as a whole and see if what you're doing is achieving the ultimate goal. Okay, so if you are dealing with certain types of people, here are some things you can do. If they avoid or try to avoid you, try to figure out why. That's the first thing. Why would somebody avoid a situation? What's one reason?
They know you pulled them if you want.
Okay. Fear. Why else might somebody avoid? So fear of getting pulled. Fear of what else? awkwardness, yeah, for sure. So a lot of guys don't approach women at bars. They want to avoid that awkwardness that they feel, fear of rejection. Why else might people avoid particular situations? Fear, uncertainty, they're not sure, which is a lot of times why people don't put their hands up when they ask questions. They just don't know. Okay? But you have to recognize that. But you don't know why a person is avoiding you unless you ask. So determine their perspective, ask open-ended questions, let them talk, let them open up. If they're sitting behind a table, let's go take a walk, let's go grab a coffee. Most of the great ideas we come up with in our department never happen at department meetings. You know when they happen? Water cooler talk. In the locker room downstairs while we're changing after playing basketball. Having a coffee chat, just walking to Timmy's and then walking back. During that walk is when we have the best conversations because there's nothing in the way. Okay. So open-ended questions, let them express themselves. Provide a purpose and make sure the purpose and the goals are clear. Short and sweet, concise, and refer back to laws, policies, or scope of practice. If you're dealing with someone who competes, because this happens a lot, I would probably say. It happens quite a lot. First thing to do, neutralize the situation. How do you neutralize the situation? Someone's standing there like this. They're 6'8", and they're looking down. How do you neutralize the situation? Sorry? Stand up. And like this. How do you neutralize the situation? Don't stand like this too. Shake their hand. Grab their elbow, hit them in the shoulder. There's a video of Obama. He was talking with very aggressive Russians. And you should see how many times he punches them in the shoulder. But at first they were standing like this, and then at the end of it was like a 30-second video. Within 30 seconds, their arms were down and they were talking now. So neutralize the situation as best as possible. Okay. If they are in their territory, this person who is aggressive, take them out of that territory in a neutral area, sideline of a football game, and they're watching the game. What do? Plays going on. Think about timing. Think about a neutral area. Think about where their attention is. Okay. Perhaps bring him to the athlete during a timeout or during a break in between plays, and position yourself so that when you're talking face to face, the play isn't behind you, but they're facing the opposite direction. Proxemics. You guys remember that word? Personal space. So that's one way to neutralize the situation. Revisit the objectives and make sure they are completely aware of what the objectives are. They see the big picture. Now again, during a football game, it's pretty tough sometimes. During a basketball game, it's tough because they're wearing that coach hat. It's hard for them to see the big picture. But to remind them of what the big picture is. Remind them of what you're ultimately there for, what your role is, and what their role is. Okay. Know the rules. Know how far you can go. Okay. You do have supervisors, and the chain of command is if they don't listen to you, you report to your supervisor, and let your supervisor know. And as long as they're aware of it as well, that sometimes neutralizes the situation. Okay. Don't tell your supervisor. That's what they'll say. Okay. And last but not least, prepare for it. Again, your body language, your attire, how you approach a situation. Think about doing this first, and then doing that later on. You might have to do this if they're yelling at you. Okay. If you can do this, because it's not a life-threatening situation, they might have to do that temporarily. But you need to revisit the situation and then come up with a long-term solution. Ankle sprain, for example, at a volleyball game. Okay, it's not that bad. They give a little bit when they do whatever, but it's a playoff game, so we'll just let them play. So now you've accommodated, you've kind of compromised. Well, we'll just keep them in for 3 plays at a time, and we'll set them back up. Cool. Okay, now for next time, if it's not a playoff game, let's think about if it's not a playoff game, or it's a playoff game, if it's preseason, and so on and so forth. What will we do next time this happens? Have some of you been in that situation before? Just a simple ankle sprain, and you had to talk to your coach about how to manage that for, I mean, it's early in the season, right? So most of the time they'll probably say, well, let's just take care of it because we want to make sure they're ready for the playoffs. Okay, so that situation might arise. If you're working with someone who likes to compromise, listen to them, the main thing you need to do is look into the future. Okay, we're taking care of this now, everybody's happy, but if this happens again, can we prevent it from happening again? So let's talk about other strategies we can do to make this process a little bit easier. Let's schedule a meeting. Okay, that's if you're working with someone like this. Okay. Do you guys have any questions on how to work with someone who presents with one of those management styles? Those are just some ideas. Obviously, it's basically just a cookbook approach. Every situation will be different. One fantastic resource you have is your supervisor at that site, because they know the coaches the best, and they know a lot of the players the best. So as soon as you manage the situation, you need to step back from it and think about ways on how you can improve on how to manage that particular situation, because it'll probably come up again. Okay. So again, these are the scenarios. When you're reflecting, again, take a look and see if your goals were attained. If the relationships between you and the person you're having conflict with, if they're still maintained, if there's any threat to that relationship, you need to be aware of it. What is the process that you use? The reframe, recognize, respond. Were those processes successful? And if not, what can you do to fix them for next time? Again, replay the scenario, and is there anything you can do differently? I think one of the main things you can start off with is observe yourself. Okay, you can even do this at home. Or even when you're working in a group, just somebody hit a webcam during the 30-minute study session that you're having, and just take a look at how you hold your posture on a natural day-to-day basis. Okay. Any questions on the mindful approach? Okay, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to get into your groups. You're going to take a look at those same scenarios. You'll have about 5 minutes to discuss what you would do in that particular scenario from the perspective that you were given, so either as an instructor or student, or as a supervisor, and so on. And then we'll go through each group and talk about how you would manage that particular situation. Sound good? Okay. So you should have a copy of the scenarios in front of you. Give you about 5 minutes just to chat about it, and think about how you would approach that scenario.
Tell the students to suck it up. Just go to it.
Toward the road.
Yeah. 30%. Mine's already changed. Not by the help. Yeah.
What?
Be quiet. Just be like, well, you're the supervisor. You're saying that from the
So
not
like,
calling witness 10 people.
I would maybe have waited in Canada and be like, why did you put on that before?
Is you're going to have to ask
Question.
because you kind of know you already have the